by love or by law. Lady Marjorie of Winthorne had spent her life fearing Lord Edmund Warwick, the warlord responsible for her family's fall. But when he lifted her veil, his gaze held no cruelty, only quiet amusement. "You expected a monster," he murmured. "Tell me, my lady, am I one? If this table of contents meets your approval, you can give me the instruction." Chapter 1. The Lion of Winthorne's Fall. The tapestry of Lady Marjorie's childhood was woven with threads of gold and blood. Gold, for the sun-drenched fields of Winthorne, her ancestral home, a land of rolling hills and fertile valleys that had been the pride of her family for generations. Blood, for the day the Lion of Winthorne, her father, Lord Alaric, fell to the might of the Warwick horde, his roar silenced by the cold steel of Edmund Warwick's blade. She had been but a girl of 10 summers then, hidden away in the highest tower of Winthorne Castle, the screams of the dying echoing below. The scent of smoke and iron had clung to the air, a grim perfume that would forever haunt her dreams. She remembered clutching her mother's trembling hand, the fear in her eyes reflecting her own. Her mother, Lady Isolde, a woman of spirit and grace, had whispered reassurances, even as the foundations of their world crumbled around them. "Courage, Marjorie," she had said, her voice strained but firm. "The lion's blood runs strong in you. We do not break." But they had broken. Not in spirit, perhaps, but in circumstance. Winthorne, once a symbol of power and prosperity, had become a prize of war, its lands and titles absorbed into the vast holdings of the Warwick family. Lady Isolde, stripped of her title and her husband, had been forced into a humiliating servitude, tending to the very man who had shattered their lives. Marjorie, too, had been reduced to a shadow of her former self, a ward of the Warwick household, a constant reminder of their conquest. The years that followed were a blur of quiet defiance and simmering resentment. Marjorie learned to navigate the treacherous currents of the Warwick court, a place of opulent feasts and whispered betrayals. She watched, with a mixture of hatred and fascination, as Lord Edmund Warwick, the man who had become her jailer, ruled with an iron fist and an unnerving calm. He was a figure of imposing stature, his dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, his eyes the color of a winter storm, sharp and piercing. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never known defeat, his every gesture radiating power. He rarely acknowledged her presence, treating her with a detached courtesy that was more insulting than outright cruelty. Yet, she felt his gaze upon her at times, a fleeting scrutiny that made her skin crawl. It was as if he were assessing her, weighing her worth, a lion contemplating a captured bird. The memories of Winthorne, of her father's laughter and her mother's gentle touch, became a refuge, a secret garden she cultivated in the barren landscape of her captivity. She clung to the stories of her ancestors, the tales of valor and resilience that had been passed down through generations. She would often steal away to the castle library, a vast chamber filled with ancient tomes and illuminated manuscripts. There, surrounded by the scent of aged parchment and leather, she would lose herself in the histories of her people, finding solace in their triumphs and strength in their struggles. One cold winter evening, as snow fell silently outside the castle walls, Marjorie found herself drawn to a particular passage in a chronicle of the Winthorne lineage. It spoke of a prophecy, a legend whispered among the common folk, of a lioness who would rise from the ashes of defeat and reclaim her family's lost glory. The words resonated with a deep yearning within her, a flicker of hope in the darkness. She had learned, too, the art of concealment. Beneath a veneer of demure obedience, she cultivated a sharp mind and an unwavering will. She observed the intricate dance of courtly politics, the subtle power plays, and shifting alliances. She listened to the gossip of the servants, the boasts of the knights, the anxieties of the ladies in waiting. She learned to read between the lines, to decipher the hidden meanings behind veiled words and carefully constructed smiles. The castle itself was a labyrinth of stone corridors and hidden chambers, a testament to the Warwick's long and bloody history. Marjorie explored its depths, discovering secret passages and forgotten rooms. each with its own story to tell. She found a hidden chapel, its stained glass windows depicting scenes of ancient battles and forgotten saints. There, in the flickering candlelight, she would pray for strength, for guidance, for a way to escape the suffocating grip of her captivity. One such evening, while lost in silent contemplation, she heard the heavy tread of boots approaching. Her heart quickened. It was Lord Warwick. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the faint light of the corridor, his face obscured by shadow. "Lady Marjorie," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed through the chapel. "Praying for deliverance?" She straightened, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I pray for peace, my lord." He stepped closer, the faint scent of leather and steel surrounding him. Peace is a luxury few can afford, especially in these troubled times. "And what troubles you, my lord?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the fear that churned within her. He studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. The whispers of rebellion grow louder. "The northern lords are restless. They chafe under my rule. And do you fear them?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fear is a tool, Lady Marjorie. It can be used to control, to subdue. But it can also be a weakness." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "You remind me of your mother," he said, his voice softer now, almost wistful. She had the same fire in her eyes. He was gone before she could reply, leaving her alone in the silence of the chapel, his words echoing in her mind. The fire in her eyes. Was it a threat? A challenge? Or something else entirely? The encounter left her unsettled, a strange mixture of fear and something akin to curiosity. She'd seen a flicker of something beyond the warlord, a glimpse of a man burdened by the weight of his own power, haunted by his own ghosts. And it was that flicker, that fleeting vulnerability, that would change the course of her life forever, setting in motion a chain of events that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her heart in ways she could never have imagined. The lioness was beginning to stir, her claws unsheathed, ready to face the storm that was brewing on the horizon. The fall of Winthorne was but a prelude. The true battle was yet to come. Chapter 2. A warlord's unexpected proposal. The summons came as Marjorie was tending to the castle's herb garden, a small patch of green tucked away behind the kitchens. It was a task she had taken upon herself, finding a strange solace in the earthy scent of rosemary and thyme, a connection to the land that had been stolen from her. The young page, barely a man, bowed nervously before her, his cheeks flushed. "My Lady Marjorie, Lord Warwick requests your presence in the solar." Her heart gave a lurch. The solar. It was Lord Warwick's private chamber, a place where he conducted his most important business, where strategies were plotted and fates were sealed. She had never been summoned there before. A sense of unease settled upon her, a cold knot in her stomach. She wiped her hands on her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. "Tell Lord Warwick I shall attend him shortly," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. She made her way through the castle's labyrinthine corridors, her mind racing. What could he possibly want? Had she done something to displease him? Had her quiet defiance finally caught his attention? She paused before the heavy oak door of the solar, taking a deep breath to compose herself. She had learned to mask her emotions, to present a facade of calm indifference, but beneath the surface, fear gnawed at her. She knocked softly, and a deep voice bade her enter. The solar was a large, richly appointed room, dominated by a massive fireplace where a fire crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the tapestries that adorned the walls. Lord Warwick stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Lady Marjorie," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You have reached your 20th year." It was a statement, not a question. She inclined her head, wondering where this was leading. "It is time you were wed," he continued, his eyes fixed on her. Her breath caught in her throat. Marriage. She had known it was inevitable, that she would be used as a pawn in some political alliance, a bargaining chip to secure Warwick's power. But the reality of it, the suddenness of it, struck her with the force of a blow. To whom, my lord? She asked, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. He paused, as if savoring her discomfort.
To me.
The room seemed to spin. She stared at him, speechless, her mind struggling to comprehend his words. To him? To the man who had destroyed her family, who had taken everything from her. It was unthinkable, impossible. I do not understand, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. He moved closer, his presence filling the room. It is a simple proposition, Lady Marjorie. A marriage between us would unite our houses, solidify my hold on Winthorne, and quell any lingering thoughts of rebellion. And what are my thoughts? She asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Do they not matter? He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. You are a prize of war, Lady Marjorie. Your thoughts are of little consequence. The words were like a slap in the face. She felt a surge of defiance, a spark of the lion's fire that had been simmering within her for years. I am not a prize to be won or traded, she said, her voice rising. I am a woman, with a will of my own. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. A will that will be broken, he said softly. Just as your father's was. The mention of her father, the coldness in his voice, sent a shiver down her spine. She knew he was capable of cruelty, of ruthlessness. She had seen it firsthand, but she would not cower. She would not break. I will never submit to you, she said, her voice firm, her eyes locked on his. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile that sent a chill through her. We shall see, Lady Marjorie. We shall see. He turned away, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. You have until the next full moon to give me your answer. Refuse, and you will face the consequences. She left the solar, her legs trembling, her mind reeling. The consequences. What could they be? Imprisonment? Exile? Worse? She knew he was not a man to make idle threats. She fled to the sanctuary of the chapel, seeking solace in the quiet darkness. She knelt before the altar, her hands clasped tightly, her thoughts a jumble of fear and anger. How could she marry him? How could she share a bed with the man who had haunted her nightmares for years? But what choice did she have? Refusal would mean certain ruin, not just for her, but for what remained of her family's loyal retainers, scattered and impoverished as they were. She had a duty to them, to the memory of her father, to the legacy of Winthorne. As the days passed, the weight of her decision pressed down on her, suffocating her. She found herself avoiding Lord Warwick, unable to bear the sight of him, the sound of his voice. She wandered the castle like a ghost, her appetite gone, her sleep disturbed by vivid dreams of fire and blood. She sought counsel from the castle's chaplain, Father Michael, an old and wise priest who had served the Warwicks for many years. He listened patiently to her plight, his eyes filled with compassion. My child, he said gently, marriage is a sacred bond, a union ordained by God. But it should also be a union of hearts, of mutual respect and affection. There is no affection between us, Father, she said bitterly. Only hatred and fear. Then you must find a way to bridge that chasm, he said. Or find the strength to defy him. His words offered little comfort. She knew the risks of defiance, but the thought of surrender, of submitting to a life of servitude and resentment, was equally unbearable. As the full moon approached, casting its pale light over the snow-covered landscape, Marjorie found herself standing on the castle walls, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Warwick lands. The wind whipped around her, cold and biting, but she barely noticed. She was lost in thought, wrestling with the impossible choice that lay before her. A marriage of fire and steel. That was what it would be. A union forged in conflict, fueled by hatred and ambition. But perhaps, just perhaps, within that fire, within that steel, there could be a spark of something else. A glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption. Or was she simply deluding herself, grasping at straws in the face of overwhelming despair? The answer, she knew, lay not in the stars, but within her own heart. And as the moon reached its zenith, she knew she had to make a choice. A choice that would determine not only her own fate, but the fate of Winthorne itself. The decision weighed on her, heavy as the chains of a prisoner, yet she knew, with chilling certainty, that the dawn would bring either her freedom or her doom. Chapter 3. The Weight of a Warwick Veil. The day of the wedding dawned cold and gray, the sky mirroring the turmoil in Marjorie's heart. The castle was abuzz with activity, servants rushing to and fro, preparing for the feast that would follow the ceremony. But Marjorie felt detached from it all, a spectator in her own life. She had spent the previous night in prayer, seeking guidance, seeking strength. But the heavens had remained silent, offering no answers, no solace. She had made her decision, a decision born not of love or desire, but of duty and a desperate hope for a future she could not yet see. She would marry Lord Warwick. She would become his wife, in name if not in heart. She had sent a message to him, a simple acceptance of his proposal, delivered by the same nervous page who had brought the summons. She had received no reply, no acknowledgement. It was as if he had already dismissed her, his victory assured. She was dressed in a gown of white silk, embroidered with silver thread, a Warwick family heirloom that had been passed down through generations. It was a beautiful gown, but it felt heavy on her, a symbol of the chains that bound her. The veil, a delicate lace creation, felt like a shroud, obscuring her vision, suffocating her. Lady Beatrice, Lord Warwick's widowed sister, a woman of sharp features and even sharper tongue, supervised the preparations. She treated Marjorie with a cool disdain, her eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and pity. "You are a fortunate girl, Lady Marjorie," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "to marry such a powerful man. Most women would envy you." Marjorie said nothing, refusing to rise to the bait. She had learned to endure Lady Beatrice's barbs, to let them wash over her like water off a duck's back. But today, the word stung, a reminder of her powerlessness. As she was led to the chapel, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. This was it. There was no turning back. She walked down the aisle, her steps measured, her head held high. The chapel was filled with guests, the nobility of the Warwick lands, their faces a blur of curious eyes. Lord Warwick stood at the altar, resplendent in a tunic of black velvet, embroidered with the Warwick crest, a silver eagle on a field of crimson. He looked every inch the powerful warlord, his expression stern, his eyes unreadable. As she reached him, he took her hand, his grip firm, almost possessive. The touch sent a shiver through her, a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar sensation. The ceremony proceeded, the words of the priest echoing through the chapel, binding them together in the eyes of God and man. Marjorie repeated her vows, her voice clear and steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. When it came time for the exchange of rings, Lord Warwick produced a heavy gold band, inset with a single, dark ruby. It was a Warwick family ring, a symbol of their power and their claim on her. He slipped it onto her finger, the cold metal a constant reminder of her new status. She, in turn, offered him a simple silver band, the only piece of jewelry she had retained from her Winthorne heritage. It was a small act of defiance, a reminder of who she was, where she came from. He took the ring, his fingers brushing hers, and slipped it onto his own hand. A flicker of something surprise? Respect? Crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Then came the moment she had been dreading. The lifting of the veil. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, and slowly lifted the lace that had obscured her face. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She had expected to see triumph in his gaze, the satisfaction of a conqueror. But there was none. Instead, his eyes held a curious expression, a mixture of assessment and something else. Something she couldn't quite decipher. "You expected a monster," he murmured, his voice low, for her ears only. "Tell me, my lady, am I one?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected many things from him, but not this. A challenge, perhaps, a hint of vulnerability, even. "I do not know you, my lord," she replied, her voice equally low, her gaze unwavering. He smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Then we shall have a lifetime to remedy that, shall we not?" The ceremony concluded, and they were pronounced husband and wife. The guests erupted in cheers, but Marjorie felt a profound sense of isolation, a feeling of being adrift in a sea of unfamiliar faces. The feast that followed was a lavish affair, with tables laden with food and drink. But Marjorie had little appetite. She sat beside Lord Warwick at the high table, enduring the toasts and the well-wishes, the curious glances and the whispered comments. She felt his presence beside her, a constant, almost oppressive weight. He spoke little, observing her with that same unnerving intensity. She tried to engage in conversation with the other guests to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but her mind was elsewhere. As the evening wore on, she began to feel the effects of the wine she had been forced to consume. Her head swam, her senses dulled. She longed for escape, for the solitude of her own chamber. Finally, Lord Warwick rose, signaling the end of the festivities. He offered her his arm, and she took it, her hand trembling slightly. They made their way through the crowded hall, the guests parting before them, their eyes following them. As they reached the door of their chamber, he paused, his hand on the latch. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "This is not how I envisioned my wedding night," he said, his voice low, almost regretful. "But circumstances have dictated otherwise." She looked at him, surprised by his words. Was this a hint of remorse? A glimmer of understanding? "Nor I, my lord," she replied, her voice equally soft. He opened the door, and they stepped inside. The chamber was large and richly appointed, with a massive four-poster bed dominating the room. A fire burned in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the tapestries that adorned the walls. He released her arm, and she stood there, uncertain, her heart pounding. He moved to the window, gazing out at the darkness. "I will not force myself upon you, Lady Marjorie," he said, his back to her. "This marriage is a political alliance, nothing more. You will have your privacy." Relief washed over her, so intense it almost brought her to her knees. She had expected him to claim his husbandly rights, to assert his dominance. But he had offered her a reprieve, a space to breathe. He turned to face to her. His face softened, the hard planes shifting. "Sleep, my lady. We have a long journey ahead of us." The journey, she realized, was more than just the physical one they'd undertake tomorrow, moving to one of his more remote holdings. It was the path of their marriage, a path shrouded in uncertainty and shadowed by the past. The weight of the Warwick veil was heavy, indeed, but for the first time since the summons, a tiny sliver of hope pierced the darkness. Perhaps survival was possible after all. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Cold Halls. The journey to Northwood Keep, Lord Warwick's remote northern estate, was a grueling one. Days were spent in the saddle, the landscape growing increasingly bleak and unforgiving as they traveled further from the relative comfort of Warwick Castle. The wind howled relentlessly, whipping snow into their faces, and the silence of the vast, empty moors was broken only by the cries of ravens and the thud of horses' hooves. Marjorie, though accustomed to riding, found herself tested by the harsh conditions. She wrapped herself in furs, trying to ward off the bone-chilling cold, but the icy wind seemed to penetrate to her very core. She rode beside Lord Warwick, but they spoke little, the vastness of the landscape and the weight of their unspoken thoughts creating a chasm between them. She observed him, though, stealing glances at his profile as he surveyed the terrain. He seemed utterly at home in this wild, desolate place, his face weathered and lined, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. She wondered what thoughts occupied his mind, what burdens he carried. He was an enigma to her, a man of contradictions, capable of both ruthless cruelty and unexpected restraint. The nights were spent in hastily erected tents, the wind rattling the canvas, the cold seeping into their bones. Marjorie shared a tent with Alara, a young woman assigned to be her maid. Alara was a quiet, watchful girl, with a gentle demeanor and nimble fingers. She tended to Marjorie's needs with efficiency and a quiet sympathy, offering a small measure of comfort in the harsh surroundings. Alara was from a village near Northwood, and unlike the servants at Warwick Castle, she spoke of Lord Edmund with a surprising degree of respect, even a hint of admiration. "He is a hard man, my lady," she said one evening as she brushed Marjorie's hair, "but he is just. He protects his people from the raiders and the wild beasts. He keeps the peace." Marjorie listened, intrigued. This was a different perspective on the man she had been taught to hate. She had seen him only as a conqueror, a destroyer. But Alara's words painted a picture of a leader, a protector. The journey also gave Marjorie time to reflect on her situation. She had survived the wedding, the first hurdle in her new life. But she knew that the challenges ahead were far greater. She was now Lady Warwick, mistress of Northwood Keep, a stranger in a strange land, bound to a man she barely knew. She resolved to learn, to adapt, to find a way to navigate this new reality. She would not be a passive victim, a pawn in his game. She would find her own strength, her own purpose, within the confines of her marriage. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached Northwood Keep. It was a stark, imposing structure, built of gray stone, perched on a windswept cliff overlooking a turbulent sea. It was a far cry from the opulent beauty of Winthorne, or even the grandeur of Warwick Castle. It was a fortress, a place built for defense, for survival. The keep's inhabitants, a mixture of soldiers, servants, and local villagers, greeted Lord Warwick with a mixture of deference and wary respect. They eyed Marjorie with curiosity, their faces guarded, uncertain of what to make of their new mistress. The interior of the keep was as austere as its exterior. The halls were cold and draughty, the walls bare stone, the floors covered with rushes. The only concessions to comfort were the large fireplaces that blazed in every room, casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Lord Warwick showed her to her chamber, a large, sparsely furnished room at the top of a winding staircase. It had a large window that offered a breathtaking view of the sea, but the wind howled through the cracks, making the room perpetually cold. "This will be your sanctuary, Lady Marjorie," he said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "You will have privacy here. I will not intrude." He left her then, leaving her alone in the cold, unfamiliar room. She stood by the window, gazing out at the churning sea, feeling a profound sense of isolation. She was a prisoner here, in this remote fortress, far from everything she had ever known. But as she looked out at the wild, untamed landscape, she felt a stirring within her, a spark of defiance. She would not be broken by this place, by this man. She would find a way to make it her own, to carve out a life for herself, to find her own strength in this harsh and unforgiving land. The whispers started soon after her arrival. Servants whispered in the corridors, casting furtive glances her way. Soldiers muttered in the barracks, their eyes filled with speculation. The villagers whispered in the marketplace, their voices hushed with fear and curiosity. They whispered about the Southern lady, the conquered bride, the pawn in Lord Warwick's game. They whispered about her beauty, her silence, her resilience. They whispered about the curse of Winthorne, the belief that any who harmed the lion's family would suffer a terrible fate. Marjorie ignored the whispers, pretending not to hear them. But she was aware of them, of the constant scrutiny, the unspoken judgments. She knew that she was an outsider, a stranger in this close-knit community. She would have to earn their trust, their respect, if she was to survive. She began to explore the keep, familiarizing herself with its layout, its routines. She spent time in the kitchens, learning the names of the servants, observing their work. She visited the stables, admiring the horses, speaking with the grooms. She even ventured into the armory, watching the soldiers train, their movements precise and deadly. She sought out Father Michael, who had accompanied them from Warwick Castle, and asked him about the history of Northwood, about the people, their customs, their beliefs. She learned of the constant threat of raids from the northern tribes, of the harsh winters that tested their endurance, of the legends and superstitions that shaped their lives. She began to understand the challenges that Lord Warwick faced, the responsibilities he bore. He was not just a conqueror, he was a protector, a ruler, a judge. He was responsible for the safety and well-being of his people, and he took that responsibility seriously. This understanding didn't erase the past, but it began to complicate the simple narrative of villain and victim she had held onto for so long. The cold halls whispered secrets, but Marjorie was beginning to realize that the loudest whispers were often the ones that came from within. Chapter 5. Scars of the Fallen Dragon. One evening, as Marjorie was returning to her chamber after a long walk along the windswept cliffs, she encountered Lord Warwick in the corridor. He was standing by a window, gazing out at the darkening sky, his face etched with lines of weariness. He turned as she approached, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them, thick with unspoken thoughts. "You seem troubled, my lord," she said, breaking the silence. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The northern tribes are growing bolder. They have been raiding our outlying villages, stealing livestock, killing our people. And what will you do?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "I will defend my lands. I will protect my people. That is my duty." "And what of the cost?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned back to the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The cost is always high, Lady Marjorie. War is a cruel mistress." She moved closer, standing beside him, looking out at the same bleak landscape. "My father used to say that war leaves scars, not just on the body, but on the soul." He glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Your father was a wise man, despite his failings." The word stung, a reminder of her family's defeat. But she refused to let it show. "He taught me many things," she said, her voice firm. "About honor, about loyalty, about courage." "And what did he teach you about your enemies?" he asked, his voice low, almost challenging. "He taught me to hate them," she replied, her voice unwavering. "To never forgive, to never forget." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on hers. "And do you still hate me, Lady Marjorie?" The question hung in the air, heavy and charged. She looked at him, at the lines of weariness etched on his face, at the shadows in his eyes. She thought of the man she had believed him to be, the monster who had destroyed her family. But she also thought of the man she had begun to see, the protector of his people, the reluctant husband. "I do not know you, my lord," she said, echoing her words from their wedding day. "But I am beginning to understand you." He smiled, a faint, fleeting smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Understanding is a dangerous thing, Lady Marjorie. It can lead to complications." He turned to leave, then paused, his hand on the door. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice softer now. "Come with me." He led her down a narrow corridor to a small, unassuming door. He unlocked it with a key he carried on a chain around his neck and pushed it open. The room was small and circular, with a single window high up in the wall, letting in a shaft of pale moonlight. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with books and scrolls. In the center of the room stood a large table covered with maps and charts. "This is my private study," he said. "It is where I come to think, to plan, to escape." She looked around, intrigued. This was a different side of him, a side she had never seen before. The scholar, the strategist, the man of intellect. He gestured to a chair beside the table. "Sit," he said. She sat, and he sat opposite her, his eyes fixed on hers. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "This belonged to my father," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "He was a warrior, a leader, a man of great strength. But he also had a weakness." He opened the book, revealing pages filled with elegant script and intricate drawings. It was a journal, a record of his father's thoughts, his fears, his dreams. "He fell in love with a woman from a rival house," he said, his voice low. "A woman he could never have. Their love was forbidden, doomed from the start." He turned the pages, revealing a portrait of a woman, beautiful and ethereal, with long dark hair and haunting eyes. Her name was Lyra, he said. She was the daughter of Lord Draco, the leader of the Dragon Clan, our sworn enemies. He closed the book, his fingers lingering on the cover. Their love was discovered. My father was forced to choose between his duty and his heart. He chose duty. He betrayed her. She died, heartbroken, and he never forgave himself. He looked at his hands. Lord Draco swore revenge, a blood feud that lasted for the death of both houses. He lifted his head, met her gaze. The scar of the dragon runs deeper than you believe, Lady Marjorie. I carry it too. The revelation hung in the air, a heavy weight of shared sorrow and the echoes of past betrayals. The fallen dragon's legacy was not just a tale of conquest, but a testament to the enduring power of love and loss. It was a wound that time could not heal, a burden that Lord Warwick carried with him, a constant reminder of the price of duty and the cost of betrayal. The scars, Marjorie realized, were not just hers. They were his too. And they were, perhaps, a bridge between them, a shared pain that could either unite them or tear them apart. Chapter 6. The Falcon and the Huntress. Spring arrived slowly in the north, a gradual thawing of the frozen landscape, a hesitant emergence of life from the grip of winter. The snow melted, revealing patches of green, and the birds returned, their songs filling the air with a tentative melody. Marjorie found herself drawn to the outdoors, spending hours exploring the rugged coastline, the windswept moors, the dense forests that surrounded Northwood Keep. She discovered a hidden cove where the sea crashed against the cliffs, creating a symphony of sound and spray. She found ancient standing stones, their origins lost in the mists of time, their surfaces covered with intricate carvings. She watched the falcons soar overhead, their graceful flight a symbol of freedom and power. One day, as she was walking along the cliffs, she saw Lord Warwick practicing falconry. He stood on a rocky outcrop, a hooded falcon perched on his gloved hand. He removed the hood, and the bird launched itself into the sky, circling above him, its sharp eyes scanning the ground below. Marjorie watched, fascinated. She had always admired falcons, their beauty, their strength, their independence. She had seen them hunted at Winthorne, but she had never witnessed the art of falconry up close. Lord Warwick saw her watching and gestured for her to approach. She hesitated, then walked towards him, her steps cautious. "You admire falcons, Lady Marjorie?" he asked, his voice carrying over the sound of the wind. "They are magnificent creatures," she replied. "So free, so powerful." He smiled, a genuine smile that softened his features. "They are also loyal and deadly. They are trained to hunt, to kill, to serve their master." He whistled, and the falcon returned, landing gracefully on his outstretched hand. He stroked its feathers, his touch gentle, almost tender. "This is Shadow," he said. "He is my most prized possession." Marjorie looked at the falcon, its dark eyes fixed on her. She felt a strange connection to the bird, a sense of shared wildness, of untamed spirit. "May I?" she asked, gesturing towards the falcon. He hesitated, then nodded. He showed her how to hold her arm, how to offer the falcon a piece of meat. She held her breath as the bird hopped onto her glove, its talons gripping her leather-covered arm. She felt its weight, its power, its fierce independence. "He senses your spirit, Lady Marjorie," Lord Warwick said, his voice low. "He sees the huntress in you." The words sent a shiver through her. The huntress? Was that what she was? A predator, waiting for her chance to strike? Or was she simply a survivor, adapting to her surroundings, finding her own strength in a hostile world? He taught her the basics of falconry, how to handle the bird, how to cast it off, how to call it back. She learned quickly, her natural instincts guiding her. She felt a sense of exhilaration, of empowerment, as she worked with the falcon, feeling its wild spirit resonate with her own. Over the following weeks, they spent more time together, practicing falconry, exploring the surrounding countryside. They talked not just about falcons but about other things. About the history of Northwood, about the challenges of ruling, about their own pasts. She learned more about his life, about his years as a soldier, about the battles he had fought, the losses he had suffered. He spoke of his father, of the burden of leadership, of the constant threat of betrayal. He in turn learned more about her love for Winthorne, about her family, about her dreams for the future. He listened patiently, his eyes filled with a growing understanding, a quiet respect. They discovered a shared love for the land, for the wild beauty of the north. They rode together, exploring the hidden valleys, the ancient forests. They shared meals, simple fare eaten outdoors, the wind whipping around them. The barriers between them began to crumble, slowly, tentatively. The hatred and fear that had defined their relationship began to give way to something else. A grudging respect, a tentative trust, a flicker of something more. One evening, as they were returning to the keep after a long day of riding, they stopped to rest by a stream. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Lord Warwick dismounted, helping her down from her horse. Their hands touched, and a spark passed between them, a jolt of electricity that startled them both. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. She saw a vulnerability in his gaze, a longing that mirrored her own. "Marjorie," he said, his voice husky, his hand lingering on hers. She looked at him, her heart pounding. She saw the man behind the warlord, the man behind the mask. She saw the loneliness, the pain, the yearning for connection. He leaned closer, his breath warm on her face. She closed her eyes, her senses reeling. She felt his lips brush hers, a tentative, questioning touch. She responded, hesitantly at first, then with a growing passion. The kiss deepened, a mingling of fire and ice, of fear and desire. It was a kiss that spoke of shared pain, of unspoken longing, of a future yet to be written. He pulled away, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something akin to hope. He began, then stopped, his voice uncertain. She touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "We are bound together, Edmund," she said, her voice soft. "By fate, by duty, by something more." He took her hand, his grip firm. "Perhaps," he said, his voice low, "perhaps there is a chance for us, after all." The falcon, perched on a nearby branch, let out a piercing cry, a sound that echoed across the valley, a testament to the wildness that bound them together, a promise of a future as uncertain and as exhilarating as the flight of a bird of prey. The huntress had found her falcon, and the falcon his huntress. But the hunt, they both knew, was far from over. Chapter 7. A Glimmer in the Northern Wastes. Life at Northwood Keep settled into a rhythm, a routine punctuated by the changing seasons, the demands of ruling, and the growing complexities of Marjorie and Edmund's relationship. The initial hostility had faded, replaced by a cautious respect, a tentative intimacy. They shared meals, rode together, practiced falconry, and engaged in long conversations that stretched late into the night. Marjorie found herself adapting to her new life, finding a purpose in the management of the keep, in the care of its people. She worked with the steward, overseeing the household finances, ensuring that the stores were sufficient for the coming winter. She visited the kitchens, learning the recipes of the north, the hearty stews and thick breads that sustain the inhabitants through the harsh climate. She established a small school for the children of the keep, teaching them to read and write, sharing with them the stories of her own childhood. She also took an interest in the defenses of the keep, observing the training of the soldiers, learning about the strategies and tactics of warfare. She discovered a talent for archery, practicing with the men in the courtyard, her aim becoming increasingly accurate. Edmund watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and something akin to possessiveness. He saw her strength, her resilience, her growing confidence. He saw the way the people of Northwood responded to her, their initial wariness giving way to respect, even affection. He found himself seeking her counsel, asking her opinion on matters of governance, valuing her insights, her perspective. He realized that she was not just a beautiful woman, a prize of war, she was a partner, an advisor, a confidant. Their relationship deepened, evolving beyond the initial physical attraction. They shared their fears, their hopes, their dreams. They talked of the past, of the pain they had both endured, of the scars they carried. They began to heal, together, finding solace in each other's presence, in each other's understanding. One evening, as they were sitting by the fire in her chamber, Edmund spoke of his vision for Northwood. "I want to make this a place of strength, of prosperity," he said, his voice filled with passion. "A place where my people can live in peace, free from fear." "And how will you achieve that?" Marjorie asked. "By uniting the northern clans," he said. "By forging alliances, by ending the constant cycle of raiding and warfare." "A noble goal," she said, "but a difficult one." "I know," he said, "but I believe it is possible. With your help." She looked at him, surprised. "My help?" He nodded. "You have a gift for diplomacy, Marjorie. You have a way of connecting with people, of earning their trust. I need your help to win over the clan leaders, to convince them that peace is a better path than war." She considered his words. It was a daunting task, a dangerous one. But it was also an opportunity to make a difference, to help build a better future, not just for Northwood, but for the entire North. "I will help you, Edmund," she said, her voice firm. "I will do whatever I can." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "Thank you, Marjorie," he said. "I know I can count on you." Their relationship, however, was not without its challenges. The whispers continued, the rumors of the southern lady who had bewitched the warlord, who had softened his heart. Some whispered that she was a spy, that she was plotting his downfall, that she would betray him at the first opportunity. Lady Beatrice, Edmund's sister, remained a constant source of tension. She resented Marjorie's presence, her influence over Edmund. She saw her as a threat, an outsider who had usurped her place in the household. "You may have fooled my brother," she said to Marjorie one day, her voice dripping with venom, "but you will never fool me. I know what you are. A viper, waiting to strike." Marjorie met her gaze, unflinching. "I am not your enemy, Lady Beatrice," she said. "I am Edmund's wife. I am here to stay." The confrontation left her shaken, but it also strengthened her resolve. She would not be intimidated by Lady Beatrice, by the whispers, by the doubts. She would prove herself worthy of Edmund's trust, worthy of her place at Northwood. As summer turned to autumn, and the leaves began to change color, Marjorie found herself facing a new challenge. She discovered that she was with child. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Joy at the prospect of motherhood, of bringing new life into the world. Trepidation at the risks of childbirth, at the added responsibilities, at the uncertainty of the future. She shared the news with Edmund, her voice trembling slightly. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and overwhelming tenderness. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Marjorie," he said, his voice husky. This is wonderful news." He kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that spoke of his love, his devotion, his gratitude. "We will have a child," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "A child of our own, a symbol of our union, of our hope for the future." The news spread quickly through the keep, greeted with a mixture of celebration and apprehension. A child, an heir, would solidify Edmund's position, strengthen his hold on the north. But it would also make him, and Marjorie, more vulnerable to their enemies. The glimmer in the northern wastes, the tentative hope that had begun to blossom between Marjorie and Edmund, was now intertwined with a fragile promise of new life. It was a glimmer that could either be extinguished by the harsh realities of their world, or nurtured into a flame that would light the way to a brighter future. The child, they both knew, would be a symbol, a target, and, above all, a testament to the enduring power of love in a world consumed by conflict. Chapter 8. The Serpent's Poison Kiss. The announcement of Marjorie's pregnancy brought a shift in the atmosphere at Northwood Keep. While the majority of the inhabitants rejoiced, seeing the coming child as a symbol of stability and hope. A serpent of unease slithered beneath the surface. Lady Beatrice, in particular, seemed to harbor a venomous resentment, her whispers growing more pointed, her glares more icy. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marjorie found herself alone in the herb garden, gathering late-blooming chamomile. The air was filled with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, a poignant reminder of the approaching winter. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Lady Beatrice standing at the garden's edge, her arms crossed, her expression a mask of disdain. "Enjoying your little domain, Lady Marjorie?" Beatrice asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "While it lasts, of course." Marjorie straightened, meeting Beatrice's hostile gaze. "The garden provides solace, Lady Beatrice. Something you might find beneficial." Beatrice scoffed. "Solace? From what? The guilt of stealing another woman's place? Of trapping my brother with your condition?" Marjorie felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I stole nothing, Lady Beatrice. Your brother chose me. And this child is a blessing, not a trap." "A blessing for you, perhaps," Beatrice hissed, "but a curse for Northwood. A weak, southern air, diluting the Warwick bloodline." "This child will be strong," Marjorie retorted, her hand instinctively moving to protect her abdomen. "Stronger than you can possibly imagine." Beatrice stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. "Do not underestimate me, Lady Marjorie. I know your kind. You are ambitious, cunning, manipulative. You seek to control my brother, to usurp my family's power." "I seek only peace," Marjorie said, her voice trembling slightly. "Peace for Northwood, peace for my family." "Peace?" Beatrice laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "There is no peace for those who betray their own blood. And you, Lady Marjorie, are a betrayer. You betrayed your father, your people, by marrying the man who conquered them." The accusation stung, hitting a raw nerve. Marjorie had struggled with her own guilt, with the conflicting loyalties that tore at her heart. But she would not let Beatrice see her weakness. "I did what I had to do," she said, her voice firm. "To survive, to protect what remained of my family. And to gain power," Beatrice sneered. "Do not pretend otherwise. You are a serpent, Lady Marjorie, and you have poisoned my brother with your lies." Beatrice turned to leave, then paused, her back to Marjorie. "Mark my words," she said, her voice low and menacing. "This child will bring you nothing but sorrow. It will be the instrument of your downfall." The words hung in the air, a chilling prophecy, a poisoned kiss. Marjorie watched Beatrice disappear into the keep, her heart pounding, her mind filled with a sense of dread. She knew that Beatrice was her enemy, a dangerous enemy who would stop at nothing to destroy her. The encounter left Marjorie shaken, but it also strengthened her resolve. She would not be intimidated by Beatrice's threats. She would protect her child, her family, her future. She would fight for her place at Northwood, for the love she had found with Edmund. She confided in Father Michael, seeking his counsel, his comfort. He listened patiently, his eyes filled with compassion. "Lady Beatrice is a troubled woman," he said gently. "She is consumed by bitterness and jealousy. But you must not let her poison your heart. She speaks of betrayal, Father," Marjorie said, her voice trembling. "Of my own guilt. And I fear she may be right." "You have made difficult choices, my child," he said. "But you have done so with courage and compassion. You have sought to build bridges, to heal wounds. That is not betrayal. That is strength." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Pray for strength, Marjorie. Pray for guidance. And trust in the love that binds you to your husband, to your child." His words offered some solace, but the fear remained, a nagging doubt that gnawed at her soul. She knew that Beatrice was not the only one who questioned her loyalty, who saw her as an outsider, a threat. The whispers continued, the rumors spread, fueled by Beatrice's venomous words. One evening, as Marjorie and Edmund were preparing for bed, he spoke of his concerns. "I have heard the whispers, Marjorie," he said, his voice troubled. "The doubts about your loyalty, about the child's legitimacy." She looked at him, her heart aching. "Do you doubt me, Edmund?" He took her hands in his grip firm. "Never," he said, his eyes filled with conviction. "I trust you with my life, with my heart. But I fear for your safety, for the child's safety." He paused, his brow furrowed. "I have received a warning," he said, his voice low, "from a source I trust. There is a plot afoot, a conspiracy to remove you." Her blood ran cold. A plot. She had suspected as much, but to hear it confirmed, to know that her life, her child's life, was in danger, filled her with terror. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "I do not know for certain," he said. "But all signs point to my sister." The revelation struck her like a blow. Beatrice. She had known she was an enemy, but to plot her murder, the murder of her unborn child, it was beyond comprehension. "What will happen now?" she asked, and felt the shaking of her own limbs intensify. Edmund held her close. His arms, the warmth of his body, steadied her. "I will protect you both." "No matter the cost," he replied. The serpent's poisoned kiss had left its mark, but it had also ignited a fire, a fierce determination to protect the fragile hope that grew within her. The threat was real, the danger imminent, but Marjorie knew, with a chilling certainty, that she would not face it alone. Edmund's love, his strength, would be her shield, her sword, in the battle that was yet to come. Chapter 9. Echoes of a Lost Kingdom. The knowledge of the plot against her and her unborn child cast a long shadow over Marjorie's days. She became hyper-vigilant, constantly looking over her shoulder, scrutinizing every face, every gesture. Sleep offered little respite, her dreams haunted by images of betrayal and violence. Edmund, too, was on edge, his already formidable presence becoming even more guarded, his protective instincts heightened. He increased the guard around her, assigning a trusted soldier, a grizzled veteran named Gareth, to be her constant companion. Gareth was a man of few words, but his loyalty was unquestionable, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of danger. Despite the heightened security, Marjorie refused to be confined to her chamber. She insisted on continuing her duties, overseeing the household, interacting with the people of Northwood. She knew that fear was a weapon, and she would not allow it to control her. One morning, while visiting the keep's library, a place she had come to cherish for its quiet solitude and its wealth of knowledge, she stumbled upon a hidden alcove, concealed behind a tapestry depicting the history of the Warwick family. Intrigued, she pulled back the tapestry, revealing a small, dusty room. The room was filled with relics of the past, forgotten treasures that had been stored away and neglected for generations. There were ancient weapons, suits of armor, tattered banners bearing the crests of long-dead houses. And there were books, countless books, their pages yellowed and brittle, their bindings cracked and worn. As she examined the books, she discovered a collection of scrolls, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth. Unrolling one of the scrolls, she realized that it was a map, a detailed map of the Winthorne lands, her ancestral home. Her heart quickened as she studied the map, tracing the familiar contours of the hills and valleys, the winding course of the river, the location of the castle, her childhood home. Memories flooded back, images of her father, her mother, her life before the Warwick conquest. She unrolled another scroll, revealing a detailed genealogy of the Winthorne family, tracing their lineage back through centuries. She saw the names of her ancestors, their titles, their deeds, their triumphs and tragedies. She found a journal, written in a delicate, feminine hand. It was the journal of her grandmother, Lady Eleanor of Winthorne, a woman renowned for her wisdom, her courage, and her fierce loyalty to her family. Marjorie began to read the journal, devouring the words of her grandmother, feeling a connection to the past, a sense of belonging, a renewed sense of purpose. Lady Eleanor wrote of the challenges she had faced, the threats to her family, the burdens of leadership. She wrote of her love for her husband, her children, her people. She wrote of her unwavering belief in the strength of the Winthorne spirit, in the resilience of the lion's blood. As Marjorie read, she felt a surge of inspiration, renewed determination to reclaim her heritage, to honor the legacy of her ancestors. She would not be a victim, a pawn in someone else's game. She would be a lioness, a protector of her family, a defender of her people. She spent hours in the hidden alcove, poring over the relics of the past, learning about her family's history, drawing strength from their stories. She discovered a hidden compartment in one of the chests containing a small, silver locket. Inside the locket was a miniature portrait of her mother, Lady Isolde, her face young and radiant, her eyes filled with hope. Marjorie clutched the locket, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. It was a tangible link to her past, a reminder of the love that had sustained her through the darkest of times. She emerged from the alcove, renewed, reinvigorated, her spirit strengthened by the echoes of her lost kingdom. She would not allow the past to be forgotten, to be erased. She would keep it alive, in her heart, in her mind, in the legacy she would pass on to her child. She went looking for Edmund. She knew the risk in sharing this, that it could paint another target on her back, that showing pride in Winthorne could be taken as rebellion. But, as her grandmother wrote, the lion's blood cannot be tamed. She found him in the training yard. When their eyes met, she knew it would not be easy. "I need to speak with you." Alone, Marjorie told him. He nodded and led her back inside, to the alcove. She showed him what she found, watched his face grow tight as he unfurled the map of Winthorne. "I will not forget where I came from," she said, her voice strong. Meeting his gaze, fierce and full of fire. "And our child will know of their heritage." Edmund's face held conflict, fear, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty. It was not her. She realized that he feared. It was the past, the power of old loyalties, the possibility of rebellion. He looked down, but after a moment, lifted his face. His eyes held something she hadn't seen in a long time. Softness. "The echoes of a lost kingdom can be deafening, Marjorie," he said, his voice low. "But they can also be a source of strength, of resilience." He took her hand, his grip firm. "We will build a new kingdom, together," he said. "A kingdom where the lion and the eagle can coexist, where the past can be honored, but the future is not dictated by it." The echoes of Winthorne were strong, but the promise of a shared future, a future where old enmities could be laid to rest, was even stronger. The lost kingdom had found its voice, and it was a voice that spoke not of revenge, but of hope, of healing, of a love that could transcend the boundaries of the past. Chapter 10. Beneath the Banner of Rebellion. The discovery of the Winthorne relics and Marjorie's open declaration of her heritage sparked a subtle but significant shift in the dynamics of Northwood Keep. While Edmund, to her relief, had responded with understanding and a surprising degree of acceptance, others were less receptive. The whispers intensified, fueled by suspicion and fear. Lady Beatrice, predictably, saw this as further proof of Marjorie's treachery, her true colors finally revealed. One evening, a council meeting was called to discuss the growing threat of the northern tribes. The raids had become more frequent, more brazen, and there were rumors of a unified force gathering under a charismatic new leader, a man known only as the Shadow Wolf. The council chamber was a large, dimly lit room, dominated by a long, heavy table. Edmund sat at the head, his face grim, his eyes fixed on the map that lay spread before him. Marjorie sat beside him, her presence a silent statement of her position, her influence. The other members of the council, a mixture of seasoned warriors and trusted advisors, sat around the table, their faces etched with concern. The discussion was heated, with differing opinions on how to deal with the threat. Some argued for a preemptive strike, a show of force to deter the tribes from further aggression. Others advocated for a more defensive strategy, strengthening the keep's fortifications and preparing for a siege. Edmund listened patiently, his eyes flickering from one speaker to the next. He valued the counsel of his advisors, but he also trusted his own instincts, his own experience. As the debate reached a stalemate, Marjorie spoke, her voice clear and calm. "We must not only consider the military aspect of this threat," she said, "but also the political one." All eyes turned to her, some with surprise, some with skepticism. "The Shadow Wolf is uniting the tribes," she continued. "He is appealing to their sense of grievance, their resentment of Warwick rule. We must counter that narrative. We must show them that we are not their enemies, that we seek peace, not conquest." Her words sparked a new round of debate. Some dismissed her suggestion as naive, idealistic. Others saw the wisdom in her approach, the potential for a diplomatic solution. "And how do you propose we do that, Lady Marjorie?" Lord Ashford, a seasoned warrior with a deep distrust of outsiders, asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "By reaching out to the moderate factions within the tribes," she replied. "By offering them concessions, by addressing their grievances, by showing them that we are willing to negotiate." "Negotiate with savages?" Ashford scoffed. "That is weakness, not strength." "It is strategy, Lord Ashford," Marjorie countered. "A way to divide our enemies, to weaken their resolve, to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." Edmund, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "Lady Marjorie has a point," he said, his voice firm. "We must explore all options, not just military ones." He turned to Marjorie, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect and something akin to pride. "You have experience with diplomacy, Marjorie," he said. "You have a way of connecting with people, of earning their trust. I want you to lead this effort." The announcement stunned the council. To entrust such a delicate, such a crucial task to a woman, a Southern lady, was unheard of. "With all due respect, my lord," Ashford protested, "this is a matter for men, for warriors, not for it is a matter for those who can achieve the best outcome," Edmund interrupted, his voice sharp. "And I believe Lady Marjorie is the best person for this task." He turned back to Marjorie, his gaze unwavering. "Will you do it, Marjorie?" he asked. "Will you risk your life to seek peace?" She met his gaze, her heart pounding. It was a dangerous mission, a gamble. But it was also an opportunity, a chance to prove herself, to make a difference, to shape the future of Northwood. "I will," she said, her voice firm. "I will do whatever it takes." The decision was made. Marjorie would embark on a secret mission, accompanied by Gareth and a small, carefully selected escort, to meet with representatives of the moderate northern tribes. She would seek to negotiate a truce, to forge alliances, to prevent a full-scale war. As she prepared for her departure, she found herself drawn back to the hidden alcove, to the relics of Winthorne. She touched the silver locket, the portrait of her mother, drawing strength from her memory, from her legacy. She knew that she was walking a dangerous path, that she was risking not only her own life, but the lives of those who accompanied her. She knew that failure could mean disaster, not just for Northwood, but for the entire North. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had Edmund's trust, his support, his love. She had the strength of her ancestors flowing through her veins. She had the courage of the lioness, the cunning of the huntress. She had discovered, too, that she was pregnant. Alara had confirmed her hopes a few days ago. Now, more than ever, she needed this venture to succeed. As she rode out of Northwood Keep, beneath the banner of the Warwick Eagle, she carried with her the hopes of her people, the dreams of a better future. She was a warrior, a diplomat, a wife, and a mother-to-be. She was Lady Marjorie of Winthorne, and she would not be defeated. The banner of rebellion, she knew, was not just being raised by the northern tribes. It was also fluttering, secretly, defiantly, within her own heart, a banner of hope, of resilience, of a love that could conquer all. Chapter 11. The Price of a Stolen Dance. Marjorie's journey to the hidden meeting place, a secluded valley nestled deep within the northern mountains, was fraught with peril. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, the weather unpredictable, and the threat of discovery ever present. They traveled in disguise, posing as traders, their weapons concealed beneath their cloaks. Gareth, ever vigilant, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his hand never far from his sword. The journey took its toll on Marjorie. The physical strain of riding, coupled with the emotional stress of her mission and her pregnancy, left her feeling exhausted, drained. But she pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to succeed, to protect her unborn child, to secure a future for Northwood. They reached the valley after several days of arduous travel. It was a breathtakingly beautiful place, a hidden oasis of green surrounded by towering snow-capped peaks. A small stream meandered through the valley, its waters crystal clear, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. The meeting was held in a large tent, erected in the center of the valley. Representatives from several of the northern tribes were present, their faces wary, their eyes filled with suspicion. They were a diverse group, representing different clans, different cultures, different agendas. Marjorie, despite her apprehension, greeted them with respect, with courtesy, with a genuine desire for peace. She spoke of the shared suffering, the endless cycle of violence, the need for a new beginning. "We are not your enemies," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We are your neighbors. We share this land, this harsh and beautiful land. We should be working together, not fighting against each other." Her words were met with silence, with skepticism. The tribal leaders were hardened warriors, accustomed to conflict, distrustful of outsiders. "You speak of peace, Lady Warwick," one of the leaders, a tall, imposing man with a scarred face, said, his voice gruff. "But your husband is a conqueror, a warlord. He has stolen our lands, killed our people." "He has defended his lands," Marjorie countered. "Just as you defend yours. But war is not the only answer. There is another way. A way of cooperation, of mutual respect, of shared prosperity." She spoke of Edmund's vision for Northwood, of his desire to unite the northern clans, to forge alliances, to build a better future for all. She offered concessions, promising to address their grievances, to respect their customs, to share the resources of the land. The negotiations were long and arduous, stretching over several days. There were moments of tension, of anger, of near collapse. But Marjorie persisted, her patience unwavering, her determination unyielding. She drew upon her skills as a diplomat, her ability to connect with people, to understand their perspectives, to find common ground. She used her knowledge of the northern cultures, her understanding of their traditions, her respect for their beliefs. She also drew upon her own experiences, her own pain, her own losses. She spoke of her family, of Winthorne, of the suffering she had endured. She spoke of her desire for peace, not just for herself, but for her unborn child, for all the children of the North. Slowly, gradually, she began to win them over. Some of the leaders remained skeptical, but others were swayed by her sincerity, by her passion, by her vision for a better future. One evening, as the negotiations were nearing their conclusion, a celebration was held. The tribesmen shared food and drink, sang songs, and danced around a large bonfire. Marjorie, despite her exhaustion, joined in the festivities, seeking to build bridges, to foster a sense of camaraderie. She danced with some of the tribal leaders, her movements graceful, her smile radiant. One of the leaders, a young, charismatic man named Torvin, seemed particularly taken with her. He danced with her repeatedly, his eyes filled with admiration, his touch lingering. "You are a remarkable woman, Lady Warwick," he said, his voice low. "A woman of courage, of wisdom, of beauty." Marjorie smiled, flattered by his attention. "Thank you, Torvin," she said. "You are a skilled dancer, a gracious host." Their dance continued, their bodies moving in rhythm with the music, their eyes locked. A spark passed between them, a flicker of attraction, a moment of shared humanity. But the moment was shattered by a sudden commotion. A group of armed men burst into the tent, their faces masked, their weapons drawn. "Betrayal!" Someone shouted. "We have been betrayed." Chaos erupted. The tribesmen scattered, grabbing their weapons, preparing to defend themselves. Marjorie found herself caught in the middle of the melee, her heart pounding with fear. She saw Gareth fighting his way towards her, his sword flashing in the firelight. "Get down, my lady," he shouted, pushing her to the ground. She lay there, her face pressed against the earth, her hands protecting her abdomen. She heard the clash of steel, the screams of the dying, the chaos of battle. She saw Torvin, his face contorted with rage, fighting alongside the attackers. He had betrayed her, lured her into a trap. The stolen dance, the fleeting attraction, had been a ruse, a cruel deception. Edmund had suspected Torvin. He had warned her. But she had been blinded by his words, his charm. Now, she had paid the price. Or would. The battle raged around her, the outcome uncertain. She was trapped, vulnerable, her life, her child's life, hanging in the balance. The price of the stolen dance, she realized, was far greater than she could have ever imagined. It was a price that could cost her everything. Chapter 12. Shadows cast by a burning Sunday. The attack on the meeting was swift and brutal. Marjorie, shielded by Gareth's unwavering loyalty and fighting prowess, managed to escape the initial onslaught, but not without witnessing the horrifying carnage unfold. The tent, once a symbol of hope for peace, became a scene of slaughter, the air thick with the stench of blood and the screams of the dying. Gareth, his face grim, his sword dripping with blood, dragged her away from the chaos, pushing her through a hidden opening in the back of the tent. They fled into the darkness, the sounds of battle fading behind them. "We must get you to safety, my lady," Gareth said, his voice hoarse. "They will be hunting us." Marjorie, her body trembling, her mind reeling, nodded. She knew that Torvin's betrayal was not just a personal attack, it was a calculated move to destabilize the North, to plunge it into war. And she, the pregnant wife of the Warwick Lord, was the prime target. They fled through the night, guided by Gareth's knowledge of the terrain. They hid in caves, climbed treacherous cliffs, forded icy streams. Marjorie, despite her exhaustion and her fear, kept pace, driven by a primal instinct to survive, to protect her unborn child. As they journeyed, she reflected on the events that had led to this disaster. She had been naive, trusting, blinded by her desire for peace. She had underestimated the treachery of her enemies, the depth of their hatred. She thought of Edmund, of his love, his support, his unwavering belief in her. She knew that he would be worried sick, that he would be searching for her, that he would stop at nothing to bring her home. She also thought of her child, the life growing within her. She placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling a faint flutter, a reminder of the precious cargo she carried. She would not let anything happen to her child. She would fight for its survival, for its future. After several days of relentless travel, they reached a small, isolated village, a place where Gareth had contacts, a place where they could find temporary refuge. The villagers, wary but compassionate, offered them food and shelter, tending to Marjorie's injuries, providing her with warm clothing and a bed to rest. Marjorie, exhausted and emotionally drained, finally allowed herself to sleep. But her dreams were haunted by images of violence, of betrayal, of loss. She saw Torvin's face, his eyes filled with malice, his smile a cruel mockery. She saw the faces of the dead, the tribesmen who had trusted her, who had believed in her vision for peace. She awoke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, her body aching. She knew that she could not stay in the village for long. It was too dangerous, not just for her, but for the villagers who had offered her sanctuary. She decided to send a message to Edmund, informing him of her location, of her situation. She entrusted the message to a young boy, a shepherd who knew the mountains well, who could travel undetected. "Tell him I am alive," she said, her voice firm. "Tell him I am coming home." The boy nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. He took the message, a small, tightly rolled scroll, and disappeared into the mountains. Marjorie waited, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. She knew that the journey back to Northwood Keep would be even more perilous than the journey to the meeting. She would be hunted, pursued, her enemies determined to capture or kill her. But she was not afraid. She had faced death before, and she had survived. She had learned from her mistakes, from her naivety. She had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience she had not known she possessed. She spent her time preparing for the journey, gathering supplies, studying maps, planning her route. She practiced with a bow and arrow, honing her skills, preparing to defend herself if necessary. She also spent time reflecting on her relationship with Edmund. She realized that her love for him had deepened, grown stronger, through the trials they had faced together. She admired his strength, his courage, his unwavering commitment to his people. She appreciated his trust in her, his willingness to share his power, his burdens. She knew that their marriage was not just a political alliance, it was a partnership, a bond forged in love, in respect, in shared adversity. She knew that they would face the future together, whatever it may hold. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the mountains, Marjorie saw a figure approaching the village. It was a rider, mounted on a large, black horse. Her heart leaped with recognition. It was Edmund. He had received her message, and he had come for her. He had ridden through the dangerous mountains, risking his own life to rescue her. She ran towards him, her arms outstretched. He dismounted, catching her in a fierce embrace. "Marjorie," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are alive. You are safe." He held her close, his body trembling. She felt his love, his relief, his overwhelming joy. "I am here, Edmund," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I am home." The reunion was brief, bittersweet. They knew that they could not linger. They had to return to Northwood Keep, to face the consequences of Torvin's betrayal, to prepare for the coming war. "I found this near where they ambushed us." Edmund held out a small, broken piece of metal. The shape made her gasp. It was part of a clasp, one she recognized. A falcon, wings outstretched. But not the Warwick eagle. This was a different bird. A different house. Beatrice's. The shadows cast by the burning sun were long and dark, and they pointed not to the northern tribes, but to the heart of Northwood Keep itself, to a betrayal far more personal, far more devastating than Marjorie could have ever imagined. The stolen dance had not only cost her a chance at peace, it had revealed a serpent in their midst, a serpent wearing the guise of family. Chapter 13. A pact forged in blood. The revelation of Beatrice's treachery sent shockwaves through Northwood Keep. Edmund, enraged and heartbroken by his sister's betrayal, ordered her immediate arrest. She was confined to her chamber, guarded day and night, awaiting trial. Marjorie, though still recovering from her ordeal, found herself thrust into the center of the ensuing turmoil. She was torn between her anger at Beatrice's actions, her sympathy for Edmund's pain, and her fear for the future. The carefully constructed peace she had sought to build lay in ruins, and the North was on the brink of war. Edmund, consumed by grief and a thirst for vengeance, struggled to maintain control. He lashed out at his advisors, his soldiers, even at Marjorie. He was a man haunted by betrayal, by the knowledge that his own sister had plotted to kill his wife, his unborn child. Marjorie, understanding his pain, tried to reach him, to offer him comfort, to remind him of their shared goals, their shared love. "Edmund," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "you cannot let your anger consume you. You must be strong, for your people, for our child." He looked at her, his eyes filled with anguish. "She betrayed me, Marjorie," he said, his voice raw. "My own sister. How can I ever trust anyone again?" "You can trust me," she said, taking his hands in hers. "You can trust Gareth. You can trust Father Michael. You can trust the loyal people of Northwood. Not everyone is your enemy." He held her gaze, his eyes searching hers. He saw the strength in her eyes, the unwavering love, the resilience that had sustained her through so much. "I know," he said, his voice softening. "I know I can trust you. You are my rock, Marjorie. My anchor in this storm." He pulled her close, holding her tightly, as if afraid to let her go. She felt his body trembling, his pain palpable. "We will get through this, Edmund," she said, her voice soothing. "Together. We will find a way to overcome this betrayal, to build a better future." The trial of Lady Beatrice was swift and decisive. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The broken falcon clasp, the testimony of witnesses, the confessions of captured attackers. She was found guilty of treason, of attempted murder, of conspiracy to incite war. The punishment for such crimes was death. Edmund, despite his anger, his pain, hesitated to pronounce the sentence. He was torn between his duty as a lord, his need for justice, and his love for his sister, however twisted and betrayed that love may be. He sought Marjorie's counsel, asking her opinion, her guidance. "What would you have me do, Marjorie?" he asked, his voice filled with anguish. "She is my sister, my blood, but she has committed unspeakable crimes." Marjorie considered his words carefully. She knew that Beatrice deserved punishment, that she had to be held accountable for her actions. But she also knew that executing her would only deepen the wounds, fuel the cycle of violence. "Justice must be served, Edmund," she said. "But justice does not always mean vengeance. There is another way, a way of mercy, of forgiveness, of healing." She suggested an alternative punishment, banishment. Beatrice would be stripped of her title, her lands, her possessions. She would be exiled from Northwood, forever forbidden to return. Edmund listened to her words, his face reflecting the internal struggle he was facing. He knew that Marjorie was right, that vengeance would not bring peace, that it would only perpetuate the cycle of hatred. He announced his decision to the council, his voice firm, resolute. "Lady Beatrice is guilty of treason," he said. "But I will not stain my hands with her blood. I will show mercy, not for her sake, but for the sake of Northwood, for the sake of our future." Beatrice was banished, sent away from Northwood Keep under guard, her fate uncertain. She left without a word, her face a mask of hatred, her eyes filled with a chilling promise of revenge. The banishment of Beatrice, while a necessary step, did not resolve the underlying conflict. The northern tribes, emboldened by Torvin's treachery and fueled by rumors of Warwick weakness, were preparing for war. Edmund, knowing that a military confrontation was inevitable, began to mobilize his forces, preparing for a long and bloody campaign. He strengthened the keep's defenses, trained his soldiers, gathered supplies. Marjorie, despite her pregnancy, insisted on playing an active role in the preparations. She worked with the steward, overseeing the provisioning of the troops, ensuring that they had adequate food, clothing, and weapons. She organized the women of the keep, training them to tend to the wounded, to support the war effort. She also sought to forge alliances with other northern lords, those who had remained loyal to Warwick, those who shared their desire for peace. She sent emissaries, carrying messages of solidarity, of cooperation, of shared strength. One evening, as they were reviewing the war plans, Edmund turned to Marjorie, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You are risking too much, Marjorie," he said. "You should be resting, preparing for the birth of our child." "I am preparing," she said, her voice firm. "Preparing for the future, for the world our child will inherit. I will not stand idly by while our enemies seek to destroy us." He took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "I know," he said. "You are a warrior, Marjorie, a true lioness of Winthorn." He paused, his gaze softening. "But you are also my wife, the mother of my child. I cannot bear the thought of losing you." "You will not lose me, Edmund," she said, her voice unwavering. "We will face this together, as we have faced everything else. We will survive. We will triumph. We will build a better future." Their pact was forged in the blood of their enemies, in the blood of their ancestors, in the blood that flowed through their veins, uniting them in a common purpose, a shared destiny. It was a pact of love, of loyalty, of resilience, a pact that would be tested in the fires of war, a pact that would determine the fate of Northwood, the fate of the North, the fate of their unborn child. The war was coming, but they were ready. They were united. They were strong. Chapter 14. The Thorns of a Warwick Rose. As the threat of war loomed, Marjorie found herself increasingly drawn to the keep's gardens. The small, walled garden behind the kitchens, with its herbs and vegetables, offered a sense of normalcy, a connection to the earth, a reminder of the life that continued to flourish despite the looming conflict. But there was another garden, a larger, more formal one, that held a particular fascination for her. It was the Rose Garden, a place that had been neglected for years, its beauty hidden beneath a tangle of weeds and overgrown bushes. The Rose Garden had been planted by Edmund's mother, Lady Annalise, a woman renowned for her beauty, her grace, and her love of flowers. But after her death, the garden had fallen into disrepair, a reflection of the grief and turmoil that had engulfed the Warwick family. Marjorie, drawn to the hidden beauty of the neglected garden, decided to restore it. She spent hours clearing away the weeds, pruning the overgrown bushes, tending to the neglected soil. She discovered a variety of roses, their colors faded, their blooms sparse, but their resilience evident. She enlisted the help of Alara, her maid, and a few of the other women of the keep. They worked together, their hands dirty, their faces flushed with exertion, finding a shared purpose, a sense of camaraderie, in the restoration of the garden. As they worked, Marjorie learned more about Lady Annalise, about her life, her love for Edmund, her tragic death. She discovered that Annalise had been a woman of great strength, of quiet wisdom, of unwavering loyalty to her family. She had been a peacemaker, a mediator, a source of comfort and guidance to her husband, Lord Warwick's father. Marjorie felt a connection to Annalise, a sense of shared spirit, a kinship that transcended time and circumstance. She saw in Annalise a reflection of her own aspirations, her own desire to be a force for good, a source of strength and healing in a world consumed by conflict. One day, as she was pruning a particularly thorny rose bush, she pricked her finger, drawing blood. She stared at the droplet of blood, a vivid crimson against the pale skin of her hand. It was a reminder of the pain, the sacrifice, the fragility of life. She thought of Beatrice, of her betrayal, of the thorns that had pierced their family, their lives. She thought of the coming war, of the bloodshed, the loss, the suffering that it would bring. But she also thought of the roses, of their beauty, their resilience, their ability to bloom even in the harshest of conditions. She thought of her unborn child, of the hope it represented, the promise of a new beginning. She realized that the Rose Garden was more than just a place of beauty. It was a symbol, a metaphor for their lives. It was a place of thorns and blossoms, of pain and joy, of loss and renewal. It was a place where life and death intertwined, where beauty and sorrow coexisted. As the garden began to flourish, its roses blooming in a riot of colors, Marjorie found herself spending more and more time there, seeking solace, finding inspiration, drawing strength from its beauty. She would sit on a stone bench, beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree, and contemplate the challenges that lay ahead. Edmund, noticing her frequent visits to the garden, joined her one evening. He watched her as she tended to the roses, her movements gentle, her touch loving. "You have transformed this place, Marjorie," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You have brought it back to life." "It was never truly dead, Edmund," she said. "It was just sleeping, waiting for someone to awaken it." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. "Like you awakened me," he said, his voice soft. She looked at him, her heart filled with love. "We awakened each other, Edmund," she said. "We found each other in the darkness, and together, we are finding our way to the light." He took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "This garden is a testament to your strength, Marjorie," he said. "To your resilience, to your ability to find beauty even in the midst of adversity." He paused, his gaze shifting to the roses. "My mother loved this garden," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "She found peace here, solace. She would have loved you, Marjorie." The words touched Marjorie deeply. She felt a connection to Annalise, a shared love for this place, for this family, for this land. "I wish I could have known her," she said, her voice soft. "You do know her, Marjorie," Edmund said. "You know her through her garden, through her son, through the spirit that lives on in you." As they sat together in the twilight, the scent of roses filling the air, they felt a sense of peace, of serenity, a moment of respite from the looming storm. The thorns of the Warwick rose were sharp, but the blossoms were beautiful, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always beauty, always the promise of renewal. The garden was a sanctuary, a testament to the enduring power of love, of life, of the human spirit. And it was there, amidst the thorns and the blossoms, that Marjorie found the strength to face the coming war, the courage to fight for her family, for her people, for her future. Chapter 15. Secrets of the Ancient Keep. With the war looming and tensions high, Marjorie found a strange comfort in exploring the deeper, older parts of Northwood Keep. While Edmund was occupied with military preparations, reviewing troop deployments, and meeting with his war council, she delved into the castle's history, seeking to understand its secrets, its soul. Father Michael, the keep's aging chaplain and a repository of local lore, became her guide in this exploration. He had served the Warwicks for decades and knew the keep like the back of his hand. He spoke of the castle's origins, of the ancient kings who had built it, of the battles that had been fought within its walls, of the ghosts that were said to haunt its corridors. Northwood Keep is more than just a fortress, Lady Marjorie, he said one day, as they walked through a dimly lit passage. It is a living thing with a memory, a spirit of its own. It has witnessed centuries of history, of triumph and tragedy, of love and loss. He led her to a section of the keep that was rarely used, a series of underground chambers that had once served as dungeons and storage rooms. The air was cold and damp, and the silence was broken only by the drip of water and the scurrying of rats. "These chambers have seen much suffering, my lady," Father Michael said, his voice echoing in the darkness. "They hold the echoes of pain, of despair, of forgotten souls." Marjorie shivered, feeling a sense of unease, of sadness. But she was also drawn to the mystery of the place, to the secrets it held. In one of the chambers, they discovered a hidden door, concealed behind a loose stone. Father Michael, with some effort, managed to open the door, revealing a narrow, winding staircase that led down into darkness. "I never knew this existed," he said, his voice filled with surprise. "This must lead to an even older part of the keep, a part that has been sealed off for centuries." Intrigued, Marjorie insisted on exploring the staircase. She held a torch, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls, and descended into the unknown. The staircase led to a large, circular chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was profound, almost oppressive. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, its surface covered with strange symbols. Marjorie examined the carvings, recognizing some of them as runes, ancient symbols of power, of magic. "This is a place of great age, my lady," Father Michael said, his voice hushed with awe. "A place of ancient ritual, of forgotten gods." Marjorie felt a strange energy in the chamber, a sense of power, of mystery, of connection to the past. She touched the altar, feeling a tingling sensation in her fingertips. As she explored the chamber, she discovered a small, hidden alcove, concealed behind one of the carvings. Inside the alcove, she found a wooden chest, its surface intricately carved with scenes of battles and mythical creatures. She opened the chest, her heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, she found a collection of objects, a jeweled dagger, a silver amulet, a leather-bound book. The book was written in an ancient language, a language she did not recognize. But as she turned the pages, she saw drawings, illustrations of plants, of animals, of the human body. It was a book of healing, of medicine, of ancient knowledge. She realized that she had stumbled upon a treasure trove of forgotten wisdom, a legacy of the past that could be of immense value in the present. The knowledge contained in the book could help her tend to the wounded, to heal the sick, to support the war effort in ways she had not imagined. She spent hours in the chamber, studying the book, deciphering its secrets, learning about the ancient healing practices. She discovered remedies for various ailments, recipes for potions and salves, techniques for treating wounds and injuries. She also learned about the history of the keep, of the people who had lived there, of their beliefs, their customs, their struggles. She discovered that Northwood Keep had once been a center of learning, a place where knowledge was valued, where healers and scholars gathered to share their wisdom. As she delved deeper into the secrets of the keep, she felt a growing connection to the past, a sense of belonging, a renewed understanding of her own place in the unfolding story of Northwood. She was not just a Southern lady, a conquered bride. She was a part of this place, a custodian of its history, a guardian of its future. She shared her discoveries with Edmund, showing him the ancient chamber, the hidden alcove, the treasure trove of knowledge. He was amazed, intrigued, and deeply grateful. "You have unearthed a treasure, Marjorie," he said, his voice filled with awe. "A treasure that could help us win this war, that could help us build a better future." He recognized the value of the ancient knowledge, the importance of preserving the past, of learning from the wisdom of those who had come before. "This keep holds more secrets than I ever imagined," he said. "And you, Marjorie, are the key to unlocking them." The secrets of the ancient keep, the forgotten knowledge, the hidden chambers, all served to strengthen Marjorie's resolve, to deepen her connection to Northwood, to empower her in the face of the looming conflict. She was not just a wife, a mother-to-be, a leader. She was a healer, a scholar, a guardian of the past, a builder of the future. And as the war drums grew louder, she knew that she would draw upon all of her strength, all of her knowledge, all of her courage, to protect her family, her people, her home. Chapter 16. Flight from the Eagle's Nest. Despite Marjorie's efforts to heal and prepare, the war descended upon Northwood Keep with the brutal force of a winter storm. Torvin, fueled by Beatrice's treachery and his own ambition, led a massive army of northern tribes against the Warwick stronghold. The siege began, a relentless assault on the keep's defenses, a test of strength, of will, of endurance. Edmund, a seasoned warrior, led the defense with courage and determination. He rallied his troops, organized the defenses, and fought alongside his men on the battlements. He was a force to be reckoned with, a leader who inspired loyalty, who commanded respect, who would not yield. Marjorie, despite her advanced pregnancy, refused to be confined to the safety of her chamber. She insisted on playing an active role in the defense, organizing the women of the keep, tending to the wounded, providing support and encouragement to the fighting men. She drew upon the knowledge she had gained from the ancient book, using her skills as a healer to save lives, to ease suffering. The siege was long and brutal. The keep was bombarded with stones and fire, its walls battered, its defenders exhausted. The fighting was fierce, hand-to-hand combat on the battlements, a desperate struggle for survival. Marjorie witnessed the horrors of war firsthand, the bloodshed, the suffering, the loss. She saw men die, their bodies broken, their lives extinguished. She saw the fear in the eyes of the defenders, the determination, the courage. She worked tirelessly, tending to the wounded, offering comfort to the dying, providing a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. She used her knowledge of herbs and remedies, her skills as a healer, to save lives, to ease pain. But despite their valiant efforts, the keep's defenses began to crumble. The enemy forces were too numerous, too determined. They breached the outer walls, forcing the defenders to retreat to the inner keep. Edmund, realizing that the situation was desperate, made a difficult decision. He ordered Marjorie to evacuate, to flee the keep with her unborn child, to seek safety elsewhere. "You must go, Marjorie," he said, his voice firm but filled with anguish. "You must protect our child. You must survive." Marjorie refused. She would not leave him. She would not abandon her people. She would not flee in the face of danger. "I will not go, Edmund," she said, her voice unwavering. "I will stay here, with you, with our people. I will fight alongside you." "You cannot fight, Marjorie," he said, his voice pleading. "You are with child. You must think of the baby. You must think of our future." He held her close, his body trembling. He kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that spoke of his love, his fear, his desperation. "Please, Marjorie," he said, his voice choked with emotion.
"Go.
"For our child's sake. For my sake." She looked into his eyes, saw the pain, the love, the unwavering determination. She knew that he was right, that she had to protect their child, that she had to survive. With a heavy heart, she agreed. She would flee the keep, seek safety, and pray for Edmund's survival, for the survival of her people. Gareth, ever loyal, ever vigilant, was assigned to escort her. He had prepared a secret passage, a tunnel that led from the keep to a hidden cave outside the walls. Under the cover of darkness, Marjorie, Gareth, and Alara, who refused to leave her mistress's side, slipped away from the keep, their hearts pounding with fear, with hope, with a desperate prayer for survival. As they fled through the tunnel, Marjorie heard the sounds of battle raging above them, the clash of steel, the screams of the dying, the roar of the flames. She knew that Northwood Keep was falling, that her home, her sanctuary, was being destroyed. When they'd reached a safe enough distance, Gareth had paused. He looked back to the keep, flames consuming the sky. "It falls, my lady," he said. Marjorie closed her eyes, said a silent prayer, a desperate plea for the safety for those they'd left behind, including, and she was shocked to realize it was true, her husband. They emerged from the tunnel into the cold night air. The sky was ablaze with the light of the burning keep, a horrifying spectacle of destruction. Marjorie looked back at Northwood Keep, her heart breaking. She had come to love this place, this harsh and beautiful land, these people. She had found a home here, a family, a love. But now it was all gone, consumed by fire, by hatred, by war. She turned away, her tears flowing freely. She had to be strong, for her child, for Edmund, for the future. She had to survive, to carry on, to rebuild. She mounted a horse that Gareth had secured. With a last look at her former home, she rode out into the night. The flight from the eagle's nest was a desperate escape, a journey into the unknown, a leap of faith. Marjorie, the pregnant lioness, was on the run, hunted, pursued, her fate uncertain. But she was not defeated. She was a survivor, a warrior, a mother-to-be. And she would not give up. She would fight for her child, for her love, for her future. The eagle's nest had fallen, but the lioness had escaped, and she would roar again. Chapter 17. The Heart of a Shattered Vow. The journey away from Northwood Keep was a harrowing ordeal. Marjorie, Gareth, and Alara traveled under the cover of darkness, avoiding roads and settlements, relying on Gareth's knowledge of the wilderness to guide them. They faced hunger, exhaustion, and the constant threat of discovery. Marjorie's pregnancy made the journey even more difficult, her body strained, her energy depleted. They found temporary refuge in abandoned crofts, in caves, and once, in a deserted monastery. They foraged for food, hunted small game, and relied on the kindness of strangers, those few who dared to offer them aid. Marjorie, despite her physical discomfort and her emotional distress, remained strong, determined. She drew upon her inner reserves of resilience, her unwavering commitment to protecting her unborn child. She thought of Edmund, of his love, his courage, his sacrifice. She prayed for his safety, for his survival, for the day they would be reunited. She also thought of her child, the life growing within her. She placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling the movement of the baby, a reminder of the hope, the future, the love that sustained her. Gareth, ever vigilant, protected them with unwavering loyalty. He was a skilled warrior, a resourceful guide, a silent guardian. He anticipated dangers, scouted ahead, and ensured their safety. Alara, despite her youth and her fear, proved to be a valuable companion. She tended to Marjorie's needs, providing comfort, support, and an unwavering loyalty. She was a source of strength, of resilience, of hope. As they journeyed, Marjorie reflected on the events that had led to their flight, to the fall of Northwood Keep. She thought of Beatrice's betrayal, of Torvin's treachery, of the devastating consequences of their actions. She also thought of her own choices, her own mistakes. She had been naive, trusting, too eager to believe in the possibility of peace. She had underestimated the hatred, the ambition, the cruelty of her enemies. But she had also learned, grown, transformed. She had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience she had not known she possessed. She had learned the value of loyalty, of courage, of love. One evening, as they were camped in a hidden valley, Marjorie went into labor. The pains came suddenly, intensely, taking her breath away. Gareth, though a seasoned warrior, was clearly out of his depth. Alara, however, stepped forward, her eyes filled with a calm determination. "I have helped with births before, my lady," she said, her voice steady. "I know what to do." Under Alara's guidance, Marjorie labored through the night. The pain was excruciating, relentless, but she endured, drawing strength from her love for her child, from her hope for the future. As the dawn broke, casting a pale light over the valley, Marjorie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He was a beautiful child, with dark hair and bright blue eyes, a miniature version of his father. She held her son in her arms, her heart overflowing with love, with joy, with gratitude. He was a miracle, a symbol of hope, a testament to the enduring power of life. "He is strong, my lady," Alara said, her voice filled with awe. "A true Warwick." Marjorie smiled, her tears flowing freely. "He is a Warwick," she said, "and a Winthorn. He is the future." She named him Alaric, after her father, the Lion of Winthorn. It was a name that spoke of courage, of strength, of resilience. The birth of her son, however, did not diminish the dangers they faced. They were still fugitives, hunted by their enemies, their future uncertain. They continued their journey, traveling towards the coast, seeking a way to escape the north, to find refuge in a safer land. As they traveled, Marjorie received news from a passing traveler. Northwood, keep had fallen. Edmund was presumed dead. The news struck her like a blow, shattering her heart, extinguishing her hope. She collapsed, her body racked with sobs, her grief overwhelming. Gareth and Alara tried to comfort her, but their words were inadequate. She had lost everything, her home, her husband, her future. She held her son close, her tears falling on his face. He was all she had left, the only reminder of the love she had shared with Edmund, the only reason to keep going. But even in her grief, she found a spark of defiance, a flicker of determination. She would not give up. She would not surrender. She would survive, for her son's sake, for Edmund's memory, for the future. She would honor Edmund's sacrifice. The vow they had made to one another to protect Northwood, to find a way to unite their houses, to create a better future for their child felt shattered, broken by the winds of war and betrayal. Yet, in the very heart of that broken vow, Marjorie found a new resolve. Edmund's death, if true, would not be in vain. She would raise Alaric to be a strong, just, and compassionate leader. She would teach him about his father, about his heritage, about the importance of peace, of unity, of love. She would carry on Edmund's legacy, his vision for a better future. She would fight for that future, even if it meant facing her enemies alone. The heart of the shattered vow was not empty, it was filled with a new kind of strength, a new kind of love, a new kind of determination. Marjorie, the fugitive lioness, was no longer just a mother protecting her cub, she was a queen in exile, a leader in waiting, a warrior ready to reclaim her birthright, to avenge her loss, to build a new kingdom from the ashes of the old. The journey was far from over, but Marjorie, with her son in her arms, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 18. Where Loyalty and Love Collide. The news of Edmund's presumed death, though devastating, did not break Marjorie's spirit. Instead, it ignited within her a fierce determination to survive, to protect her son, and to reclaim what had been stolen from them. She resolved to reach the coast, find passage on a ship, and seek refuge in the south, perhaps even returning to the remnants of her own Winthorn lands. The journey was arduous, fraught with danger. Gareth, ever loyal, proved to be an invaluable protector and guide, his skills as a warrior and his knowledge of the terrain essential to their survival. Alara, too, continued to be a steadfast companion, caring for both Marjorie and young Alaric with unwavering devotion. As they neared the coast, they encountered a group of travelers, merchants heading south. Marjorie, concealing her true identity, presented herself as a widow seeking passage to a safer land. The merchants, wary but sympathetic, agreed to allow them to join their caravan. The journey south was slow and uncomfortable, but it offered a measure of safety. Marjorie kept to herself, focusing on caring for Alaric, her heart heavy with grief and uncertainty. She constantly scanned the faces of the other travelers, searching for any sign of recognition, any hint of danger. One evening, as they were camped near a small village, Marjorie overheard a conversation between two of the merchants. They were discussing the war in the north, the fall of Northwood Keep, the death of Lord Warwick. "They say he fought bravely," one of the merchants said. "A true warrior, to the end." "Aye," the other merchant replied. "But he was betrayed, they say, by his own sister. A viper in his own nest." Marjorie listened, her heart pounding. The merchant's words confirmed what she had already heard, but hearing it again, from strangers, brought a fresh wave of grief. But then, one of the merchants said something that made her blood run cold. "They say his body was never found," he said. "Lost in the fire, or perhaps taken." Taken? What did that mean? Could Edmund still be alive? A flicker of hope, however faint, ignited within her. She approached the merchants, her voice trembling. "Excuse me," she said, "but I overheard your conversation. You said Lord Warwick's body was never found?" The merchants looked at her, surprised by her interest. That's what we heard," one of them said. "Rumors, of course. But there's talk that he may have escaped, that he may be in hiding." Marjorie's heart leaped with a mixture of hope and fear. Could it be true? Could Edmund still be alive? She questioned the merchants further, seeking any information, any detail that might shed light on Edmund's fate. They could offer little more than rumors, speculation, hearsay. But for Marjorie, it was enough. A spark of hope had been rekindled, a possibility that she could not ignore. She resolved to change her plans. She would not flee to the south. She would stay in the north. She would search for Edmund. She would uncover the truth. She confided in Gareth, sharing her hopes, her fears, her determination. Gareth, though skeptical, pledged his unwavering support. "If there is a chance he is alive, my lady," he said, "we will find him. We will not rest until we do." Alara, too, offered her support, her loyalty unwavering. Together, they left the merchant caravan, striking out on their own, their destination uncertain, their path fraught with danger. They traveled in secret, seeking information, following rumors, pursuing any lead that might point them towards Edmund. They encountered resistance, hostility, fear. The North was a war-torn land, its people divided, suspicious of outsiders. But Marjorie persisted, driven by her love for Edmund, by her hope for his survival, by her determination to reclaim her life, her family, her future. Their search led them to a small, isolated village, a place where rumors of a mysterious warrior, a man matching Edmund's description, had surfaced. The villagers were wary, reluctant to speak, but Marjorie, with her gentle persistence and her genuine concern, managed to gain their trust. She learned that a man matching Edmund's description had been seen in the area, wounded, hiding in the nearby mountains. He was said to be accompanied by a small group of loyal followers, survivors of the fall of Northwood Keep. Marjorie's heart soared with hope. It had to be Edmund. He was alive. She set out to find him, guided by a young shepherd who knew the mountains well. The journey was treacherous, the terrain difficult, but Marjorie pressed on, driven by her unwavering determination. Finally, after days of searching, they found him. He was hiding in a remote cave, his body weakened by his injuries, his spirit weary, but his eyes still burning with that familiar fire. Their reunion was emotional, overwhelming. They embraced, their tears flowing freely, their hearts overflowing with love, with relief, with joy. "Edmund," Marjorie said, her voice choked with emotion. "You are alive. You are alive." "Marjorie," he said, his voice hoarse. "I thought I had lost you. I thought I had lost everything." He held her close, his body trembling. He kissed her, a long, passionate kiss that spoke of his love, his gratitude, his unwavering devotion. He told her his story of how he had escaped the burning keep, of how he had been rescued by a small group of loyal soldiers, of how he had been hiding, recovering, waiting for a chance to strike back. He had believed her to be dead, lost in the fire. The news of her survival, of the birth of their son, filled him with a renewed sense of hope, of purpose. He was surrounded by the surviving members of his guard, including, Marjorie saw with a pang, a young, strikingly handsome woman. Their reunion, however, was not without its complications. Edmund was a changed man, haunted by the fall of Northwood Keep, by the betrayal of his sister, by the loss of his men. He was bitter, angry, consumed by a desire for revenge. And there was the young woman, Anya, who had clearly tended to him, whose eyes held something for Edmund that looked a great deal like love. Marjorie, too, was changed. She had endured hardship, loss, and the challenges of motherhood. She had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience she had not known she possessed. She was no longer just a wife, a mother. She was a leader, a warrior, a queen in exile. The collision of their loyalties to their people, to their past, to their newfound realities and their love, tested by separation and fueled by reunion, created a complex dynamic, a delicate balance between hope and despair, between trust and suspicion, between the past they had shared and the future they had yet to forge. The war was far from over, and their personal battles, it seemed, were just beginning. Chapter 19. Ashes of a Forgotten Dream. The reunion with Edmund, though filled with joy and relief, also brought new challenges, new complexities. The war had changed him, hardened him, left him with scars both visible and invisible. He was consumed by a desire for revenge, a burning need to reclaim Northwood Keep, to punish those who had betrayed him. Marjorie, while understanding his pain, also recognized the dangers of his single-minded focus. She had seen the devastation of war, the futility of endless conflict. She had hoped for a different path, a path of peace, of reconciliation, of rebuilding. Their differing perspectives led to tension, to disagreements, to moments of strained silence. They were both strong-willed, determined individuals, accustomed to leadership, to making their own decisions. And then there was Anya. The young woman, a skilled warrior and healer, had been instrumental in Edmund's survival. She had tended to his wounds, protected him, offered him unwavering loyalty. It was clear that she had also developed feelings for him, a deep affection that she struggled to conceal. Marjorie, though grateful for Anya's help, could not help but feel a pang of jealousy, a flicker of insecurity. She had been separated from Edmund for months, had endured hardship and loss, had given birth to their son alone. She had feared him dead, had mourned his loss. And now, she found herself facing a rival, a woman who had shared his suffering, who had earned his gratitude, who perhaps even held a place in his heart. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Alaric, their infant son. Edmund, upon seeing his son for the first time, was overwhelmed with emotion. He held Alaric close, his eyes filled with tears, his heart overflowing with love. But he was also a warrior, a leader, consumed by the demands of war. He struggled to balance his responsibilities as a father with his duties as a commander, his desire for revenge with his love for his family. Marjorie, understanding his struggles, tried to support him, to offer him counsel, to be his partner in this difficult time. But she also had her own responsibilities, her own fears, her own needs. One evening, as they were sitting by the fire in their makeshift camp, Marjorie spoke to Edmund about her concerns. "Edmund," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I understand your desire for revenge. But we must also think of the future, of our son, of our people. We cannot allow this war to consume us, to destroy everything we hold dear. He looked at her, his eyes filled with pain. What else can we do, Marjorie? He asked. They have taken everything from us. Our home, our people, our future. We can rebuild, she said. We can find a way to unite the North, to forge a lasting peace. We can create a better future for our son, for all the children of the North.
Peace? He scoffed.
There is no peace with Torvin, with the tribes who betrayed us. There can be, she insisted. We must find a way. We must reach out to the moderate factions, to those who are weary of war, to those who seek a different path. And what of Beatrice? He asked, his voice bitter. What of the woman who plotted to kill you, to kill our child? Marjorie sighed. Beatrice is your sister, Edmund, she said. I know you are hurting, but vengeance will not bring you peace. It will only perpetuate the cycle of violence. He looked away, his face troubled. She knew that he was struggling, torn between his desire for revenge and his love for his family, his duty as a leader and his responsibilities as a father. I don't know what to do, Marjorie, he said, his voice filled with anguish. I feel lost, adrift. She took his hand, her grip warm and strong. You are not alone, Edmund, she said. We are in this together. We will find a way, together. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Anya. She approached them hesitantly, her eyes fixed on Edmund. My lord, she said, her voice respectful but tinged with a hint of something else. The scouts have returned. They have news of Torvin's movements. Edmund immediately rose, his attention shifting to Anya. Tell me, he said, his voice sharp. Anya reported that Torvin was gathering his forces, preparing for a final assault on the remaining Warwick loyalists. He was planning to attack a nearby stronghold, a place where many of Edmund's supporters had taken refuge. Edmund's eyes hardened. We must stop him, he said. We must ride to their aid. He turned to Marjorie, his expression determined. I must go, Marjorie, he said. I must lead my men. I must fight. Marjorie nodded, her heart heavy with apprehension. She knew that he had to go, that he had a duty to his people. But she also feared for his safety, for his life. He kissed her goodbye, a brief, tender kiss that spoke of his love, his gratitude, his farewell. He then turned to Alaric, his infant son, and held him close, his eyes filled with tears. Be strong, my son, he said, his voice choked with emotion.
Be brave.
Be worthy of your name. He handed Alaric back to Marjorie, his gaze lingering on her face. I will return, Marjorie, he said. I promise you. I will come back to you, to our son. He then turned and strode away, Anya at his side, his warriors following close behind. Marjorie watched him go, her heart filled with a mixture of love, fear, and a profound sense of loss. The ashes of their forgotten dream, the dream of peace, of unity, of a future together, seemed to swirl around her, a bitter reminder of what had been lost. But even in the midst of the ashes, a spark remained, a flicker of hope, a stubborn refusal to surrender. She would not give up. She would not lose hope. She would wait for Edmund. She would protect their son. She would fight for the future, even if it meant facing the darkness alone. The forgotten dream was not dead, it was merely buried, waiting for the chance to rise again, to bloom again, in the ashes of war. Chapter 20. The Reckoning of Love and Duty. The battle was fierce and brutal, a clash of steel and blood that echoed through the mountains. Edmund, driven by a thirst for revenge and a desperate need to protect his remaining followers, fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself. He cut down his enemies, his sword a blur of motion, his heart filled with a cold, hard rage. Anya fought beside him, her loyalty unwavering, her skills as a warrior undeniable. She protected his flank, anticipated his movements, and saved his life on more than one occasion. He was grateful for her presence, for her strength, for her unwavering support. But even as he fought, his thoughts were with Marjorie, with Alaric, with the future they had dreamed of together. He knew that his actions were driven by more than just a desire for revenge. They were fueled by a need to protect his family, to secure a future for his son, to reclaim what had been stolen from them. The battle raged for hours, the outcome uncertain. But slowly, gradually, Edmund's forces began to gain the upper hand. Torvin's army, weakened by internal divisions and demoralized by Edmund's relentless assault, began to crumble. Finally, Edmund faced Torvin in single combat. The two men circled each other, their eyes locked, their hatred palpable. Torvin, fueled by ambition and a twisted sense of entitlement, taunted Edmund, mocking his losses, his failures. "You are finished, Warwick," Torvin sneered. "Your keep is destroyed, your wife is dead, your people are scattered. You have nothing left." Edmund's grip tightened on his sword. "I have my son," he said, his voice cold. "And I have my honor. And that is all I need." They clashed, their swords meeting in a shower of sparks. Edmund, fueled by his rage and his love for his family, fought with a strength he had not known he possessed. He parried Torvin's blows, countered his attacks, and slowly, gradually, gained the upper hand. Finally, with a desperate lunge, he disarmed Torvin, his sword point pressing against the traitor's throat. "It is over, Torvin," Edmund said, his voice trembling with exhaustion and a strange sense of emptiness. He could have killed him. He could have ended his life, avenged his losses, satisfied his thirst for revenge. But he hesitated. He looked into Torvin's eyes, saw the fear, the desperation, the realization of defeat. And he saw something else. He saw a reflection of himself, of the darkness that had consumed him, of the hatred that had driven him. He lowered his sword. "It is over," he repeated, his voice softer now. "But the killing ends here." He spared Torvin's life, taking him prisoner instead. It was a decision that surprised his men, that angered some, that confused others. But it was a decision that was rooted in his love for Marjorie, in his desire for a different future, in his hope for a lasting peace. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Edmund knew that he faced a long and difficult road ahead, a road filled with challenges, with obstacles, with uncertainties. He returned to Marjorie, to Alaric, a changed man. The fire of revenge had been extinguished, replaced by a weary determination to rebuild, to heal, to unite. He found Marjorie waiting for him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief, joy, and a quiet understanding. "You spared him," she said, her voice soft. He nodded. "I could not kill him, Marjorie," he said. "I could not become the monster he wanted me to be." She embraced him, her arms holding him close. "You are not a monster, Edmund," she said. "You are a good man, a strong man, a loving man." He held her tightly, his body trembling. He had faced death, he had conquered his enemies, but he had also faced himself, his own darkness, his own demons. And he had found, in the midst of the ashes of war, a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, a path towards a better future. And Anya, seeing them together, seeing the depth of their bond, she released whatever hope she held in her heart and pledged fealty to them both. Her duty would supersede her own desires. The reckoning of love and duty had been a painful, transformative journey. Edmund had chosen love, had chosen peace, had chosen a future where his son could grow up without the shadow of war, without the burden of hatred. He had chosen Marjorie, his wife, his partner, his queen. He had chosen a future where the lion and the eagle could coexist, where the past could be honored, but the future would not be dictated by it. The war was over, but the rebuilding had just begun. Edmund and Marjorie, together, would face the challenges ahead, would heal the wounds of the past, would unite the North, would create a kingdom worthy of their son, worthy of their love, worthy of their sacrifice. The reckoning had been harsh, but it had also paved the way for a new beginning, a new hope, a new dawn. Epilogue. Years passed. The scars of war slowly faded, replaced by the gentle rhythms of peace and rebuilding. Northwood Keep, once a symbol of conflict and division, rose again from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than before. Edmund, guided by Marjorie's wisdom and compassion, ruled with a firm but just hand, uniting the northern clans, forging alliances, and fostering a sense of shared purpose. Alaric, their son, grew into a strong, intelligent, and compassionate young man. He inherited his father's courage and his mother's wisdom, a blend of the lion and the eagle, a symbol of the unified North. He learned the ways of war, but he also learned the value of peace, the importance of diplomacy, the power of understanding. Marjorie, no longer the Southern lady, the conquered bride, was revered as the Queen of the North, a wise and beloved leader, a healer, a peacemaker. She had fulfilled the prophecy of the lioness, rising from the ashes of defeat to reclaim her family's lost glory, not through conquest, but through love, through compassion, through unwavering determination. The Rose Garden, once a neglected reminder of a lost past, flourished under Marjorie's care, its blooms a vibrant testament to the enduring power of life, of beauty, of renewal. It became a place of peace, of reflection, of remembrance, a symbol of the healing that had taken place, the hope that had been reborn. Edmund and Marjorie, their love tested by fire, by betrayal, by loss, emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. They had learned from their mistakes, had grown together, had found a way to balance their individual strengths, their shared dreams. They ruled together, loved together, raised their son together, creating a legacy of peace, of unity, of enduring love. Anya remained a loyal friend and trusted advisor, her skills as a warrior and healer invaluable to the rebuilding efforts. She found her own happiness, marrying a skilled craftsman and raising a family of her own, her loyalty to Edmund and Marjorie unwavering. Beatrice, banished and forgotten, faded into obscurity, her dreams of power and revenge turning to dust. Her fate served as a reminder of the destructive consequences of hatred, of betrayal, of unchecked ambition. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilt Northwood Keep, casting a golden glow over the landscape, Edmund and Marjorie stood together on the battlements, watching Alaric practice sword fighting in the courtyard below. "He is strong, Edmund," Marjorie said, her voice filled with pride. "He will be a great leader." Edmund nodded, his eyes fixed on his son.
"He will," he said.
"He has the best of both of us." He turned to Marjorie, his eyes filled with love. "We have come a long way, my love," he said. "We have faced many challenges, endured many losses. But we have survived. We have triumphed." Marjorie smiled, her heart filled with gratitude. "We have," she said. "And we have built something beautiful, something lasting, something worthy of our sacrifice." They embraced, their love a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The ashes of the past had fertilized the soil of the future, and from that soil, a new kingdom had bloomed, a kingdom of peace, of unity, of enduring love. The reckoning of love and duty had been a long and arduous journey, but it had led them to a place of peace, of fulfillment, of lasting happiness. The lion and the eagle, once enemies, were now united, their strength combined, their love a beacon for generations to come. The story of Marjorie and Edmund, the lioness and the warlord, would be told and retold, a legend of courage, of resilience, of the transformative power of love in a world consumed by conflict. The end had come, but the beginning, a new era of peace and prosperity, had just begun. The end.